Yeah, let me read that. Want is a subjective thing. Very true, Zimmerman. Truth is essential. Question is, how do you win the hearts and minds of those against you? You can't do it without truth or full integrity. And who is against? And, okay, so let me take a sidestep here. One of the things that is I'm not settled with is there's a lot of anger about the 1%, you know? And I wonder how many people marching about how unfair this is, if you looked at their lives, are they living one of altruism, of charity, of when they have a choice of do you want, I mean, do you have $10 more than you need today? Are you giving one of those away? I'm sure a lot of people are. But I think that the model of behavior that so much of our culture has is identical whether if you happen to be smarter and richer and better at manipulating the system, or if you're kind of a victim of all of this. People don't be, you're not simply, I mean, it's very easy to ask for more charity when you have less. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I'm saying that the protests should be less about you suck, and more that we need to demand something of all of us. We need to expect a different level of discourse, compassion, valuing of life and health and foreign peoples and whatever those things are. Merely saying that, you know, they are greedy, or, you know, I'm not against corporations, I'm against corporate greed. I've seen that all the time. I'm not against corporations, I'm against, you know, corporate greed. I'm like, that's like being against terrorism. What does that mean? You know, who is the corporate greed? What is the corporate greed? You know, most of us are trying to maximize our income. Most of us. So I think that so much of this path needs to be twofold, of inward work and outward expression. Anytime they are the problem, you're doomed. Whether it's a relationship with one person, whether it's in your company, whether it's in your family, or the world. If they are the problem, well, they have to be a pretty awesome person to just accept that. More awesome than you for putting the blame at them. There's so much, you know, Tucker and I were talking, I don't know, a couple weeks ago about the number of things that you can do. I mean, there's the bumper sticker, the Gandhi quote, be the change you want to see in the world. And there are few ideas more important. What we often think is, you know, be the change. Well, Jacob Glass says it goes, what we see that, I mean, what we really mean is, I want you to be the change that I'd like to see in the world. But what is it really, I mean, are you being the change, you know? Thinking that the world is unfair isn't being the change. Acting more fairly is being the change. I know that for a long time, like I try to be very vigilant about paying for things that I would like to be paid for. You know, if I expect or want people to donate money to something that I think is important, then I try to donate to money. Anytime a friend of mine or anybody I know says, hey, I'm doing this fundraiser, I try to give a little bit at least, as much as I can. Well, not as much as I can. That's as much as I feel comfortable giving. Because that's the way I want the world to be. I want, when I need resources, I want the world to treat me that way. And that is, and as I take those steps, that has been my experience. You can't just, you know, never give charity and then expect when it's time for your fundraiser, you get it. There's a great, I think it's whoever wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You want to help me who that was? There's, he talks about, you know, relationship bank accounts. And you have to make deposits before you can take a withdrawal. And simply thinking that it's unfair does not put you in a position to take a withdrawal. You know, you have to put in, you need to express, you need to role model the behavior that you want the world to reflect to you. If that means more charity, if that means more fairness, if that means more whatever it is, you have to be the model of that. That's what being the change means. And then as you are that, ideally, you become this unintentional or intentional ambassador and educator. Every step you take in the world is your message. You can't cheat on your taxes and then be pissed that someone who had a lot more money cheated, paid this little. I mean, my dad is one of the only people I know who, when he goes to get his taxes done, he just says, "What do I owe?" Like he does no trickery. I don't want you to find any loopholes. I want to know what I owe. That is huge. If someone said, "Well, you could kind of mention this, and you won't get caught for that," and this is, and so, you can't pay the minimum that you have to on your taxes and charity, and then expect people who have a lot more money to suddenly become altruistic. Zimmerman says, you have a way more drastic effect on the world by changing yourself than by trying to change others. I've been talking recently about inspiration activism, where the way that I am motivated to change is by seeing people who decide that they could be better and make those changes. And then they share their actions, not from a place of, you should do this, but in a place of, I made this choice and I feel great about it. I feel like I'm now living more righteously, I'm taking the high path. Whatever effects this has is irrelevant. The point is, I've adjusted my path. And that's all we're ever doing, is adjusting our path. 30 years ago, I teased people on the schoolyard and was incredibly cruel. I used incredibly insensitive wording. But then I got to a certain point and I realigned and I got back in what felt like alignment. And then I got to a point where, acting in a certain way felt okay, and then it was out of alignment. And then life is that path. And so, certainly before we need to start attacking others, we need to adjust ourselves. Because the attacks, if I was side by side with myself 20 years ago, I would be filled with judgment of that person. So I have to recognize now that I am also midway on my path, and I have to have compassion for me and compassion for my 30 years ago self, and hope that we all can extend that and have that compassion towards ourselves, towards the people around us, and towards the people that we think don't get it at all, because they are midway on their path. And if you are fighting against someone, how are they going to see your actions as an instrument of change and realignment for them? Impossible. Gandhi didn't say, "You're wrong." He said, "I'm going to walk righteously. And I'm just going to keep walking righteously. And if you don't see it, it will become clear enough." If you don't create a wall, there's nothing to punch against. Well, and the danger, Jenny was saying, you can't wait for the approval of others. That's exactly right, because the reality is, how do you know that anyone else is any more right than you are? If you are this is where comes the idea of getting still, getting clear, being very critical of what is motivating you. Are you being motivated by some argument so that your mind is convincing you this is right? Or are you tethering that to a feeling of what you feel like is the right thing to do? Because the only authority on your life is you. I'm going to say that again. The only authority on your life is you. that means the only judge is. That means if you make a change towards the better you, there is no additional measuring stick. Oh, you only changed this many people by doing so. It doesn't matter. You changed you. That's the only thing you do. That's the only thing that matters. The only thing that matters. And if you can reach that integrity, I think you have no choice but affecting people with ripples. Let me do this just in case. Oh, let me change the settings so that you can allow links. Sorry about that. Now, Kaki, you can repost that link.